like to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Placer County Parks Commission. Actually, what is our new name? It's an open space, gotcha. Okay, well, I gotta learn that. So, first item of business is a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next, item 2 is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Okay. Yeah,
I'll
the
second,
motion by
I'll second
Dave.
it.
Oh, we have a second? Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, agenda is approved. Public comment. Persons may address the commission on items not on this agenda. Public comment is limited to 15 minutes, so please limit comments to 3 minutes per person. All comments cannot be heard within the 15-minute time limit. The public comment period shall be taken up at the end of the regular meeting. The commission is not permitted to take any action on items addressed under public comment. So, public comment is open. Do we have any public comments? Yes, sir.
My name is Jerry Mitchell. I'm from Rockland, and I have reviewed your plan for the Parks and Trails expansions. It's really quite comprehensive, and I'm very pleased with it. I just have one area of concern that I'd like to, and I don't know whether that topic is going to come up in the context of your meeting here, so if you...
So,
Yes, but I think you're going to go through the master plan, and the opportunity to bring that topic won't be there. But,
okay, well, I guess we can entertain this comment for 3 minutes.
okay, thank you. Actually, I sent in an email through your system at the invitation that came out, and I'm not sure whether it's going to be talk through this very quickly. Thank you.
If you like, I could just pass it down. You bet. And then you can give them to those guys over there.
I think you gave me two. Excuse me, sir. You gave me two.
Dave, it's one. You got one? Yeah, sure.
Anyway, as I mentioned, I'm very excited about the prospect, the long-term prospect of the development of trails that interconnect. I think it'll be fine. And a yeoman's job of putting this together has been done. But my experience in Roseville's trails is several years ago, I noticed that they put these signs up, and you can see on both pages a little convoluted routine in terms of you have to walk on the left, and the oncoming bikers are to ride on the right, which has them coming right at you. And then in my own experience in those situations, not only with the bikes, but people in general, all over the United States, our practice in America is to drive on the right, walk on the right, and pass on the left. And I'm all sure you're familiar, if you've done any of this, that it's a common practice for bicyclists who are coming up upon a pedestrian to say, on your left, and they go on the left, and everything works. But if you've ever been on those Roseville trails, I'll make it brief, you end up with this herky-jerky routine where I'm supposed to be on the right here, but I can, everybody's hopping around a little bit because it's non-standard. It's 180 degrees out of the way we normally do it. And so my question is, one, is there some kind of report that somebody produced somewhere along the line that says this is the way you should do it? And I asked our Rockland Recreation Commission that, and they said, I don't know. They haven't adopted anything like that, by the way. Then I went to Roseville Recreation Commission asked them, and he said, well, it's what Sacramento did. Okay, so that's the way we flipped this. And he said, well, it was based on a theory that people are wearing earbuds, and therefore they wouldn't. But even you run that through your head and those experiences, you're going to say, whoa, that's weird. So what I want to know is there's a factual basis for doing this, number one. And number two, is it your intention to impose that condition on this trail plan or anything associated with it? Or can cities that are in the plan go on their own? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any additional public comment? Okay,
Denny, please unmute your mic and state your comment. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Jenny Rush. I'm superintendent Newcastle Elementary School District. I've had the pleasure of working with folks from the Parks Department recently on a project that would serve the community. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to recognize the professionals that they are and how incredibly helpful they've been to a layperson that's never been involved with the Parks Department before. So that's the entirety of my comment.
thank you. Do we have any additional public comment? Person or remote? All right, hearing none, we'll close public comment. Is there?
Oh, yep. No, you're right.
Cheryl, is that?
Hi, good evening. My name is Cheryl Berkema. I'm a Granite Bay resident. I just had a general comment on trails in general. And it has been, there's a lot of safety concerns on social media for 2 reasons. One is dogs that are running off leash, creating, actually attacking people, attacking other dogs. So I'm sure you're aware of this, but I did want to bring it up. And the other is the encampments. This has been at the Board of Supervisors, but in general, people are feeling like they can't even walk the trails in their community. So as a general concern, when budgeting for planning, trails, what was brought up as a suggestion, which I wanted to carry on, was that there should be potentially bike law enforcement on some of these trails so that people can feel safe walking on them. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comment, Cheryl.
We have one more here.
Okay.
Oh, no. Yep.
Okay, so no more remote public comment? We're good? Okay, so that wraps up the public comment period. Thank you very much. Go to item 4, action item, receive presentation, final draft, County Parks Trails Master Plan. Make a recommendation to support for the plan to the Board of Supervisors. Okay, thank you, Andy.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I just want to thank you for taking this evening as a special meeting to come and talk with us about the Park and Trail Master Plan that has been in the works for 5 years. We've heard a number of similar comments to the one you just heard tonight, to the effect that it has taken a lot to put together. It's taken a lot of people to put it together. It's taken a lot of partners, a lot of agencies, a lot of data. I want to compliment, to begin with, our consultant, Design Workshop, and Stephanie Grigsby, the principal on the project, who's here with me tonight and will be introducing the item tonight. You'll recall in April, I believe, of 2021, your commission made a recommendation, May 16th of 2019, I'm living in the past, made a recommendation to support this plan. At the time, We were working through the Hidden Falls project. You'll remember that had a lot of attention on it, both concern and support. And the decision at that time was made to pause the master plan project until there was a decision on Hidden Falls, so that did not become a contentious issue for the plan overall. We did wait on that. As you know, the plan was approved last March. And at that time, we opened the master plan up again to circulate for public comment, to try to make sure it is a complex plan. We wanted to get it as accurate and as good as we could get it, so we opened it up again. At that time, we took comments through June. We spent a few months working through those comments, checking all the math, all the figures, all the complexity of the plan, republished the plan again in December, and have taken comments up to today. So we're going to refresh you on that plan and then bring you up to speed on all the comments that we've received up to today with a new recommendation for you. And I did also want to mention all the comments we received up until we had to finish our presentation tonight. We did incorporate into the presentation or into your staff report. There were a couple of comments that came in that you should have in your hand, both concerning Granite Bay. So we will be talking about those comments as well, and you have those emails that came in to us today, one from Cheryl Berkema, who just spoke, and the other from Chris Johnson, both of Granite Bay. So wanted them to be aware that we did pass out their comments to you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to introduce some of the elements of the plan, and we will switch off during the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, commissioners, for your time tonight. As Andy said, I will take you a little bit back to where we started and how we got to the plan that we have today. So part of it was really that a Parks and Trails Open Space Master Plan really is first and foremost to meet the needs of the residents that it serves. So we worked really hard to have broad outreach, and as part of that outreach, started out with a countywide survey where we received over 3,000 surveys that were initiated and 2,400 that were fully completed. Throughout the years, meeting with the MACs, over 50 MAC presentations were conducted, and we met with over 60 agencies and organizations to gain their input in terms of understanding what they were looking for as part of partner agencies on their lands and thinking about recreation for the full county. In addition to that outreach piece, we also really wanted to make sure we were looking at best practices. So along with Design Workshop, we had a team of Pros Consulting who really dives into funding, understanding parks trends and recreation elements, and Stantec Engineering, who also looked at helping us with the GIS database, and will be thinking about the standards moving forward. Through that, really looking at benchmarking, so understanding what some of the peer communities were doing, what their parks and trail systems looked like, how that might influence some of the recommendations for the county itself, and really weaving that back and forth with understanding where trends, where best practices in parks planning looks at, and where that might influence the county, and then also hearing back from residents about how they really wanted to shape the your system for the future. And with that, I'll turn it back to Andy for a little bit to talk about some of the achievements within the system.
During the 5 years we've been working on this plan, a lot of the things that have been suggested in this plan and documented in this plan have already started to come to fruition. A lot of exciting things are happening. So we've not been idle pending this plan, and I did want to point out some of the things that are going on that we're excited about. First, the Hidden Falls Regional Park Trails Expansion Project. The photo in the upper left on this slide is a vista from one of the trail points that we will be developing with the Hidden Falls Expansion Project. We'll have a slide and show you some of the initial improvements that we're going to be building that we're grant funded to begin construction on next year. So we're excited about that project. Up in the Tahoe area, elements of the Resort Triangle Trail that will connect all of the communities of North Tahoe are being built. The Dollar Creek Trail near Dollar Point, Martis Valley Trail that your commission toured last September will be completely paved out and connected as soon as the weather gets warm enough to finish the final paving. So this year, we'll be able to be on a completely road separated from the road paved trail between the town of Truckee and North Star Drive. We're excited about that. North Tahoe Regional Park Field, which you also saw last year on our September tour. I think a great illustration, a great example of the partnerships that we engage with our park dedication fee program, where they were able to take some development funding from the county, enlarge their artificial turf field, and now open it up to a variety of new sports, of tournaments, kind of regional participation up at North Tahoe Regional Park in Tahoe Vista, funded by us for development, but maintained in perpetuity by them. You'll see in the lower photo, we have also begun, particularly in the Granite Bay and Loomis area, a program of water savings by taking out old kind of high water use fescue rye mixed turf and installing hybrid Bermuda, saving literally millions of gallons a year, up to 50% of the water in our parks in Granite Bay. And that did come out. That was a strong show of support within the surveys. What do people want to see within our park and trail system? And one of the high responses, one of the highest responses we got was water savings in our parks. And so we've engaged in that already. We've also, as a department and as a county, gotten ourselves much more into vegetation management in the past several years. You can see in the upper right-hand corner there some of the shaded fuel breaks. We've cleared, treated over 500 acres a year on all county properties, not just parks. And then the formation of the Placer Vineyards Park and Recreation District to serve urban development in West Placer has also became a reality last July. So some of those things going on. Placer County has been also active in what it's already developed. It's already a place with a lot of regional, internationally recognized trails. The Tahoe Rim Trail, you could see there, the Western States Trail. Elements of what we call the Lake Tahoe Bikeway and the Resort Triangle. So that's the paved trail in black that you see making its way around Lake Tahoe. You can see the segments there. The Resort Triangle that will connect the communities of Truckee, Olympic Valley, North Star to Tahoe, and be kind of a figure eight all the way around Lake Tahoe and the cities and communities to the north. In the far west, you can see progress that's been made on the popular American River Bikeway that goes from downtown Sacramento to Folsom, now becoming a regional loop. So you'll be able to travel all the way through the communities of Granite Bay, Roseville, West Placer, back down to downtown Sacramento, with points of opportunity to get on from the cities of Roseville, Rockland, Granite Bay, Lincoln. And so our plan takes what's already been done. And envisions what that would look like if we can connect everything together, all the communities around Placer County. So you can see the completion of the Tahoe Bikeway, the completion of the Resort Triangle. One of the most forward-thinking elements of this plan is a trail that will go all the way from the Tahoe area in Truckee down to Auburn. It would be an alternative to the Western States Trail. It would be along the I-80 corridor. We're also working with a group advocating for a trail along the Bear River corridor that we'd be able to take opportunities potentially from NID relicensing, from trail easements, from property already publicly owned along the Bear River as well. So making all those connections, working with Nevada County and their Pines to Mines Trail, you see just to the north of Placer County, connecting to that. So we're really taking a regional look at all of these trails. And as you go further to the west, see opportunities to connect Placer County and Auburn down to the extensive trail system in Cool in the Auburn State Rec area, opportunities to connect the Hidden Falls Trail network to the north, to the west, and to the east to other trail systems. And then as you go into the west, we look at trail systems in far western Placer County that coincide with the Placer County Conservation Plan, which not uncoincidentally was adopted after 15 years of work, was adopted by Placer County as a joint powers authority for conservation of up to 50,000 acres that you see in dark green there over the next 50 years to offset urbanized development in West Placer. We worked alongside of the creation of the Placer County Conservation Plan for the opportunity to have trails in far western Placer County that would go up, not necessarily through those properties. They would not necessarily become parks. Most of those properties would be retained as agricultural conservation easements. So these trails may be along roadsides, they may be along creeks, they would be where opportunity fits best. But with the thought that if the public is going to have interest in that much open space, it would be a great thing for the public to be able to travel through it. And so that's the vision for those far western trails. Some of our big ideas in parks and improvements that we'll talk a little bit more in detail later. An extensive capital improvement program, both in parks that we already own, improvements within parks that we already have, like Dutch Flat, Forest Hill Park, Sheridan Park, Granite Bay, or Dry Creek Park Phase 3, already funded, many of those projects grant funded, as well as partner agencies. The skate park that your commission recommended park dedication fee funding for will be going to the Board of Supervisors at the end of this month, so that should help get the Colfax Skate Park off the ground. We'll talk more in a little bit about the partner agency projects and the work being done up in the Tahoe area to help those projects along, and where the county may come alongside as a funding partner, but those are projects initiated by the districts and the jurisdictions up in that area. We turn it back to Stephanie to talk about some of just the big ideas philosophically and policy-wise that have come out of this plan.
Thank you, Andy. So in addition to the specific trail and park projects that Andy will speak a little bit more about, the plan is organized into 2 volumes, each of which discusses not just what the existing inventory and conditions of the system are today, but what are those ideas in terms of recommendations and action items that the county can move forward with to continue to move forward and be a leader in recreation. Those ideas are captured through 10 principles that we're calling the big ideas. So within the parks, open spaces, and beach idea, there's 10 principles. 1, to allow flexibility to respond to the different needs. The county is quite different from valley up to the lake, so understanding the need for potential for more fields and sports recreation in the valley area, Granite Bay, and more focus on trails throughout the county, but in particular for some of the work that has been moved forward in the Tahoe East Placer County area. The idea of connecting people to nature and open space, understanding and giving a little bit more guidance policy-wise in terms of what open space is, the idea of passive recreation versus active recreation, and providing an organizational system to look at how those lands can be managed. And then also where the staging points might be in terms of providing access to those open spaces. A series of guidelines in terms of supporting recreation access to Lake Tahoe, thinking about layering in with transit systems, the trail systems, and the connectivity in that area, and looking at partnering and supporting the work that other partner agencies are doing in that effort in terms of access to the lake. Regarding trails, you can imagine trails came up very strongly in terms of the public outreach for what current recreation people were doing, and then where they really wanted to see some focus. Over 90% of respondents said they either had walked, hiked within the last year, and really had continual focus in terms of proposed projects that those rose to the top in terms of priority. So a series of entire volume of the plan in terms of looking at specifically how we can create a more connected trail system, both for neighborhoods and then also regionally across and throughout the county. 2 principles regarding programming, mapping, and communications, looking at being a leader in terms of providing the mapping and orientation for people to understand what parks are out there for Placer County residents to enjoy and how to access them, and then also specifically within trails, providing digital mapping and hard copy maps to help orient people to those spaces. I'll speak a little bit more about activating public spaces in a minute. The final 4 principles really were about funding and maintenance. When we asked where should the focus of the priority be for the plan, whether it should be on maintaining what you have now and bringing that level up, or should it be looking towards the future? There was a specific balance. You guys almost hit 50-50 of we want to make sure we're planning for the future, but we also want to make sure that we're doing the best we can with the lands that we have. So a suite of action items around partnerships, maintaining facilities and thinking about how we can make sure that the funds are there for to achieve the level of maintenance and the service levels that that your residents have come to expect, how to work with volunteer programs and thinking about leveraging other funding opportunities with partners, and finally to measure and track performance. So this plan does that first piece of establishing those benchmarks in terms of what the current inventory is, where you want to hit, but in terms of being a regional and national leader for parks and recreation, looking at annually tracking those and using that data in terms of how people are using the facilities, what mileage additions you have made for the trail system, being able to track those over time and being able to use those to gain accreditation. So finally, those big ideas are organized into 3 different specific initiatives around mapping and communication. Again, focus on the volunteer program and coordination, and then working with partners to activate public spaces. And when we think about activating public spaces, this really is an opportunity for the county to really think about connecting people to the outdoors in a very specific way. The intent is not for the county to do the traditional type of programming that parks and recreation departments do. The plan is to continue to have, not duplicate those efforts, but to really focus on, that unique piece that the county can offer in terms of, nature and environmental education, connecting people to your resources and allowing others to provide programming in your parks. So thinking about trail races, connecting youth to outdoors, outdoor power tools, safety classes, and programming such as those. So really not thinking about duplicating, but looking at where that specific niche might be in terms of programming that might not already be offered, but might be appropriate for Placer County's brand. And finally, as we went through the process, the staff was incredibly helpful and really pulled together in terms of thinking about not just what steps you want to take, but what kind of department you want to be. So the vision and the mission for the department, looking up from not just thinking about the day-to-day maintenance, but how you can actually be a leader in recreation. So that mission moving from being about construction and operation and maintenance to being more about how you can enrich lives by connecting people to the outdoor recreation and enhancing access to your natural resources. And then the vision is to be a leader in providing memorable outdoor experiences for generations to come. And I think that one of the particular things about this plan that really makes it stand out above many others that are done nationwide is the rigor that went into developing the capital improvement program. And I really have to give recognition to Andy and his staff for pulling this together. The level of depth that it goes into in terms of the specific projects and the planning of them throughout the plan really is more in depth than many plans that you'll see. And I'll turn it over to Andy to go through that.
All right, playing tag to give you a little variety because we do have a mouthful tonight. So from here, I want to get into a little bit more detail on the elements of the capital improvement plan, and then we'll pause for a minute and finish with the discussion of comments that we've received that have been incorporated into the plan before you, and then ones we received since the publishing of the last plan. So to talk about some of the projects in the capital plan, in fact, how some of them have changed over the course of this plan. The next slide is dedicated to the Hidden Falls Regional Park expansion, so I'll save a discussion about that one. Granite Bay Sports Fields at Eureka School was a Tier 1 project in the past publication of this plan. A couple of the comments before you tonight address the Granite Bay Sports Fields. So to give you an update on those fields, we had a project that was a $4 million project in partnership with the Eureka School District in the unused portion of former kind of fallow fields in the back of the Eureka School that was no longer in session as a public school. They had approached us to help develop a artificial turf field. It was going to be a $4 million project. The school had floated a bond measure that would partially fund it and asked the county to fund about $750,000 of that. The bond measure failed, and so with that and the prospect of that level of a project, we backed that project away from a Tier 1 project to a Tier 2 project. I think there still may be a good opportunity to make those fields playable with natural grass for about 1/10 of the cost of a full artificial turf field. So we still have it on as a tier 2 project. We still are hearing high demand from the residents for additional fields, but we'll talk in a few minutes about how that may be met in several different ways. But that's what's happened to the Granite Bay Sports Field project since the first publication of the plan. Sheridan Park has just gotten a boost from Prop 68 funding to help give it a facelift and rejuvenate a field up at Sheridan Park. Pretty small community, and funding is hard to come by up there, so they're very grateful to have some Prop 68 funding to leverage their park fees. Dry Creek Park Phase 3 has been funded through development in West Placer along PFE Cucuriolo Road, and you got to tour that park last year. Take a look, I believe, in July at the first phase of Dry Creek Park. We will be completing that park, but what's changed since the last plan that we've heard from the residents down there is a demand for a new trailhead along Cucuriolo Road, so that there would be parking at both ends of the trail that's there today along Walerga at the park, and Cucuriolo, I believe, about 2.5 miles down the road, so people will be able to park on either end. They're looking for additional parking options in that community. So we've added a trailhead, and we believe that could also be funded with the park dedication fees that will fund the Dry Creek Park Phase 3. Newcastle Ball Field is a new project that's just come up in the last year, and you just heard from the superintendent of Newcastle School. We're excited to have a great partnership. They also have a field that that had been graded at one time, so we've got a good flat sports field size flat area at Newcastle School off Kentucky Greens Drive in Newcastle. We have park dedication fees in the Ophir Newcastle area that we believe we can come along with the technology we're using to renovate fields in Granite Bay and Loomis as an in-house project, rejuvenate that field, plan it with the hybrid Bermuda, partner with the school district to be able to maintain it in perpetuity. And you will be hearing about that project, I believe, at your March meeting. So that's been added to our Tier 1 capital projects. It just kind of had good idea written all over it. We have the right development funding. They have the right opportunity, the right place, and the right partnership to maintain it in perpetuity. So it just all things kind of came together. The Hidden Falls Expansion Project, which was approved by the Board of Supervisors in March of 2021. We have received $3 million in funding for development of the parking lot that's shown there with the flag that says Twilight Ride. So Lisa Carnahan is working with designers right now to design that, also having regular meetings with the community, with the surrounding neighbors out there, bringing them along for review of the plans and how it can affect them. So taking comments from the neighborhood out there as we develop that park. We expect to be under construction for that parking lot in 2023, potential opening in fall of 23 or spring of 2024. Some of the priority improvements to our existing park. Loomis Basin Community Park, looking for a facelift. A lot of the work actually there has been done. One of the main priorities for that park was renovation of their fields, which has been done. So we're making progress there, but they do need a facelift to some other things like their basketball courts, things like that. Griffith Quarry Park and Museum, Lisa's been working with the community there for a long time to update their interpretive program and all the facilities within the Griffith Park and Museum. Forest Hill Park is looking for accommodations for the food trucks with their events, for new water system, for lighting for the tennis courts. They have a pot of park dedication fees up there, and you just heard at your last meeting the priority improvements for this coming year. So you're familiar with the improvements at Forest Hill Park. Ophir Creekside Park is a small piece of property beside the Lozanos Bridge in Ophir that the county owns and would one day like to develop. We've actually gone in there right now and done a lot of fuel load reduction for fire risk reduction, but it also, I think, has a good potential one day to have some very passive park, maybe a nature trail, some seating and a picnic area, that kind of thing, small scale, but allow the public next to the Auburn Ravine that runs through there. You heard about Hidden Falls. Sterling Point Equestrian Area is looking for a new bathroom. We believe we can fund that and build that for them in the next couple years. Dutch Flat Pool, you also got to tour. I believe now it's been 2 years ago, and it's the next project going out to bid on our list to build them a brand new bathroom up there that'll be ADA compliant. Cisco Grove Gould Park has funding available for a nature trail and interpretive program, so we're just looking for some project management support to be able to get that off the ground. The museums department has already done a lot of research for us on the interpretive elements of the Cisco Grove Gould Park. If you haven't been there, that's the namesake of the Cisco Grove of Cottonwoods that gives the community its name, and it's a beautiful place to go up to. Squaw Valley Park, also looking for amenities for them. I've taken some surveys within their community. They'd like to see additional pickleball courts, relocation of the tot lot. We believe we found some funding to replenish the artificial turf up there. We'll be asking the Board of Supervisors to support that this year because the artificial turf that was installed, I believe in 2004, 2007, has exceeded its life and needs to be replaced, and that's almost $1 million project. And we've talked about Sheridan Park. Talking about partner agency projects, again, it's very important to us with our limited resources that we don't do everything. So you see the parks in the middle part of the county, owned and operated by the Auburn Recreation District, and we have been able to come alongside them, merge our capital improvement plans with theirs. We coordinate on each of our 5-year plans for the distribution and expectation of how much park dedication fees will be available cash flow wise over time so that we can help support their projects as they come along. They're important to the community of Auburn. The next project that you'll see come before you is the Auburn 24-acre park, which is just about 2 blocks that direction from us, right next to their regional park. They just received a $2 million grant for development of the 24-acre park, and they'll be looking to us for matching funds. And then I did want to just talk about projects that we had originally had on our aspirational list of projects up in the Tahoe area. So we had Tier 1 projects, Tier 2, and aspirational projects. The definition of those aspirational projects were those that were a good idea, but we didn't see funding or planning on the horizon to be able to say we're going to put resources into those projects yet. But in the case of Tahoe, some of those projects, namely community center, indoor pool, those kind of things, the districts, North Tahoe Public Utility District, Tahoe City Public Utility District, have tiered off of our plan to study in more depth the feasibility of those high-intensity facilities that there's a great demand for up in Tahoe. In fact, Design Workshop has been hired by them to get into more detail. So we have taken those off of our aspirational list and we have added them to the partner agency projects in recognition that they are carrying them forward to a higher level of design than we had. Tier 1 and Tier 2 projects, most of which we have talked about. I do want to mention one typo that we found on this slide. This is a slide that comes out of the Volume 1 of the Park and Trail Master Plan, which shows in the legend there that the Phase 5 of the Overland Emigrant Trail, which is shown as one of the phases to the west, is a partner agency project. That's a typo. Actually, Phase 3, which is the portion of that trail through Donner Memorial State Park. That will be the partner agency project in the east part of that project that we will re-legendize and correct in an update to show that that's the portion that we have a memorandum of understanding with state parks for development of that portion of our trail. Memorial Overland Emigrant Trail, we have already built about a mile section. That's Lisa's project, a little over a mile that was done last year. That's been open to the public now in the Soda Springs area. We're working with Sugar Bowl, with state parks, with the Forest Service to complete a 14 mile trail from Donner Memorial State Park over Donner Summit to Kingvale to celebrate, memorialize the Overland, the original wagon route. And then that will be the jumping off point for the Auburn to Kingvale Trail that will be the alternative to the Western States Trail all the way from Truckee down to Auburn. We talked about the Dry Creek Greenway through West Placer. There's a slide to show you that in a little more detail. We have had some questions, some of the late questions coming in had to do with trail connectivity in the Granite Bay and Loomis area. The Barton Road Trail is one that we're working on right now that would connect Roseville Parkway in the south up to Douglas Boulevard in the north, and then continue north of Douglas Boulevard up to Cabot-Stallman. So that's one of those trail connectors that we're working on right now to help connect Granite Bay, the residents in Granite Bay, to the regional trails at the very south end of Granite Bay. Likewise, the Horseshoe Bar Trail, there's been an advocate group for years that have asked to get trail connectivity between Placer School on Horseshoe Bar, across Auburn Folsom Road and out to the Folsom Lake State Recreation Area. So we are trying to put that project together as we're able to get easements and to put projects, construction projects together. This again is a blow up of a little more detail of the combination of the Resort Triangle Trail, which is paved, which connects all the communities of North Tahoe. And there is a snapshot of the completion, what the Memorial Overland Immigrant Trail will look like at completion. And that is a dirt trail. And then a blow up of the Dry Creek Greenway. So that's the combination of the American River Parkway to the east, the Dry Creek Greenway through Granite Bay, Roseville, and West Placer, and then Sacramento County. It has, I think, various names, one of which is the Uweda Parkway, or they call it the Dry Creek Parkway as well. But that's the regional metropolitan Sacramento Loop Trail. That's a paved trail. The pink box in there is the study area that Lisa, in partnership with the city of Roseville, did detailed planning for the feasibility of the best alignment and came up with a report that your commission saw last week for how we're gonna complete that section within the pink box there. Sections already exist to the west of there that have been brought to us through development in West Placer, and then the private development projects of Riola Vineyards and Placer Vineyards will complete those sections into Sacramento County. Map that you've seen a couple of times, so I'll go right past this one. And as I get close to taking a breath here. Aspirational projects, again, as I said, those projects that we thought were a great idea but just didn't have the momentum immediately at hand to push forward. Hidden Falls Nature Center. We are permitted to have a nature center at Hidden Falls on the far western portion of the property. We put in for a grant to build that years ago, and we were not successful in getting that grant, but that's the kind of thing that would need to come along again, would be a lucrative grant to be able to develop that nature center, or a partner. We don't see that today, but we are permitted for it, so we want to be ready in case that opportunity comes. We talked about the Auburn to Kingvale Trail. We've heard demand from folks along the west slope of the mountains, of the Sierras, that they would like to see additional, particularly up by Soda Springs, some neighborhood parks and trailheads. I think there just needs to be more discussion of where those would be, what they would look like, and how they would be funded. So really, they remain aspirational because they just need more planning to mature. Applegate Park right now is on a well and a septic system, and we would love to bring trunk city water lines and sewer lines into the park. There are plans for those. We couldn't move forward with our project until some of those trunk lines get closer to our project, to our park. But we list it as an aspirational project because we want to continue to advocate for those utilities getting closer to our park and advocate for those projects that we could tie into. Douglas Boulevard landscape is one of our responsibility areas, the landscape along the median on Douglas Boulevard between Auburn Folsom and Sierra College. It's getting old, it's kind of outlived its life. It's a very expensive project that will have to be undertaken at some point, but we just don't see where the funding is coming from at this point. And then the impact of private development on where we will go as a department and as a county. The major developments in West Placer, Placer Vineyards, Riola Vineyards, Placer Ranch, Regional University, Bickford Ranch, all of those approved projects now. Some of them beginning to build. You're able to see rooftops in Riola Vineyards, able to see rooftops in Placer Vineyards. Each of those major developments in West Placer come with their own funding, fees for development and special taxes for ongoing maintenance, and that will eventually be a major part of the operating funding and development and operations of this department and also the Placer Vineyards Park and Rec District. So I want to recognize the impact of that new development on recreation in the county. And this is the last slide before I take a breath for a minute, but I did want to talk about funding. One of the questions that we'll be addressing is how do you fund all this stuff? And that's a great question. We have quite a bit of data on our capital improvement list behind these numbers. Between cost data that we've done, fairly extensive cost estimation of what it will cost over a roughly 20-year horizon to build these projects. And one thing I want to emphasize, like I did in the town hall, I want to emphasize here and continue to the board, we are not asking the board to shell out $12 million today in discretionary or general fund funding to augment a $303 million capital improvement project. What we're saying is these are the projects that if we look at the availability of grants, we look at the availability of park dedication fees, the funding that's already set up for the private development projects, we believe it's feasible. We think it's a realistic plan given the project management support and if these grants come to fruition. But each of these projects gets looked at on its own as it comes forward. This is not approval of any particular project. So as each one comes forward, it'll be in its own timing, in its own context. It will bring forward its own funding. These are simply expectations. The trajectory of the economy could extend this plan out or shorten it. But this is what we think we're putting before the board. And we believe that given the track record and available funding with a contribution of $12 million that we haven't identified yet, we could leverage that into a $303 million development program over 20 years. We're also taking a very close look at what it takes to maintain it after it's developed, which is sometimes the hardest money to get a hold of. So we're looking at existing funding sources that we believe are either available today, that they're already in place, or could be in place. So a lot of the funding, all of the funding, in fact, for private development projects is already in law. It's already, the funding programs are already developed. They're already adopted. They will just begin to generate revenue as new rooftops, new homes come into place. But we also look at what we get from existing fees and rentals, what we get from existing assessments and taxes, and how we see that growing over time. And then it looks like if, when this program builds out, there's still about a $1.5 million delta between what we think we have to maintain the new things on our capital list and what's available. You also see in there an important line that says TBD for capital replacement and major maintenance. That line is referring to a capital replacement program for the parks and facilities that we already have. So that's a project we're working on this year to document our entire asset inventory and to develop a schedule for replacement of what we already have. And that's something that we haven't done yet. We've done most of our capital replacement as one-off projects as they've come up. And we want to be more systematic about it, give decision makers better expectation of what's going to be coming and how to fund it. So there's a snapshot at development and ongoing costs. And before we talk about comments, I did want to take a breath there and see if there's any questions. Thank you for your patience. I know that was a mouthful.
Okay. Okay, commissioners. That was a mouthful. So as we look at this, I was kind of curious as to the dedication of Tier 1 and the declaration of Tier 1 and Tier 2 projects are pretty much the plans that the county is advocating and has the most confidence in completion. Should I phrase it that way?
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. So the Tier 1 projects are the ones that have full funding or near funding, and they're at least well along in their planning and permitting and environmental review. Tier 2 projects are those that we think are viable, that we can get there. They're just not as far along.
And there was also a comment here about judicious decision-making relative to the available funding for the maintenance of, long-term maintenance of these projects.
Right.
And we can see that in the bottom half of this slide. And I presume you're looking at the local communities to come up with that, like benefit assessment districts and that sort of thing, before, obviously, even entertaining a motion. That would be integral in the initial presentation by the community that wants to do this, I would presume.
And it's going to be project by project, context by context. So for example, the Hidden Falls project has been developed out of the Placer Legacy Program, which is a general fund funded program. So there is an expectation of some general fund support for that. But yes, if a new community comes and wants a new park, we need to look at what's already available or their willingness to be able to chip in and pay. But you're exactly right. We need to look at what's available locally, and each of those is a question. They don't go forward until we do find that funding or have that funding available on the horizon.
I might be naive. How does that general fund maintenance money be allocated? I mean, it's a long-term funding principle, because you know what, you've got appreciation on properties that you know you've got to fix.
Right.
In some fashion over the duration of the life of the property, and renewal property or abandonment, one or the other. And as that general funding is funded through property taxes and sales tax, I presume, or?
Predominantly property tax is the
Okay.
major source of general funds. Through the general plan, parks and trails are a service provided by Placer County. So
Right.
they are eligible for general funds. The general fund today provides us about $3 million a year for sites throughout the county to support parks and trails.
Maintenance or?
Maintenance, right,
Maintenance, okay.
maintenance. So that's integral to our operating budget every year. That's combined with funding from other departments to maintain landscapes around buildings like this. It's combined with assessments, and that, all that together makes up about a $7.5 million operating budget that we use yearly. So as you think about a 20-year plan and the growth of Placer County, I think part of our rough calculus here, at least, is that property taxes grow both with inflation and with new residents. And so as new residents come, there is an expansion of general funds. Again, that's not a guarantee to us, but I think we did want to make sure that we weren't, proposing something that was way out of kilter with what we thought would be the general growth of general funds within Placer County. Proportionally, we receive just about 1% of the county general fund today. And so if that were to stay static, we think that's fairly consistent with over 20 years, a rise in general fund support of about $1.5 million.
And that general fund money can be allocated to communities from which it did not come.
It can.
Okay.
That is, that's the discretionary source of revenue for the county.
Gotcha. As I think of Roseville, and then I think of North Tahoe, 10-year growth, North Tahoe has no growth, except for appreciation of property and increased property taxes that way, but there's no new development.
Right.
But there's certainly a cap on that, so it would seem to me that those communities up there, you want a pool, you have to levy a tax on yourselves for this pool.
Yeah.
And that's what has been the community's nemesis, because we have voted not to tax ourselves 3 different occasions in the last 20 years for a desired amenity, but the communities, we can't come to Auburn and say, give us the money to maintain this pool. Truckee's a different story, because of the immense growth, rapid growth they've had there. So I admire the fact that, to me, I hate to see something get built and then not be able to be maintained. And particularly if it's overutilized by a vacation community that's not generating the money to keep it in proper, keep the thing fixed and working and not dangerous. Right now, we're reaching capacity on so much stuff up there that not only is the maintenance tough, the enforcement is tough. The gentleman who commented in public comment, how do you get these guys riding on the right side of the trail so you don't run into each other? And and that sort of thing. So the compression of use has been so severe that that kind of stuff's happening right and left. So the operational and the maintenance money, to me, is becoming more and more difficult. And, you know, you're experiencing this, you can't find guys to do the work either. So no matter how much you pay and have a budget for, actually accomplishing the task has become so difficult because there's no man hours
Right.
to throw at. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I completely agree. I think that's exactly the point of the detailed planning that the PUDs are doing in Tahoe, is to say, what would it cost, where could it go, and are you willing to pay for it?
Right.
So, and I think that's the answer that they'd like to get from the community. It's easy to ask for things, but when you face the costs of development and ongoing, are you willing to put your pocketbook where your desires are, is that question they need to answer. And then in Tahoe, as you know, other sources of revenue that have supported parks include what we call the transient occupancy tax, the bed tax for short-term rentals, and then T-bid, the new tax up there on business. So, which doesn't directly support parks, but those are some of the funding sources that the Tahoe area has utilized for revenue for what they need up there for tourism and parks and things like that.
Andy, so on the grants and other, I would imagine grants come and go some years. Is that number based on kind of past experience of where you get grant money and others, or could that change? And if it could change, what percentage of that 129 million, I mean, you may not get those grants where you got them in years past, or you may find more grant money or other
Right.
available. Do you see that number fluctuating? Is there kind of a plus or minus that goes along with that 129 million?
Absolutely, and as I say, the reason that we're saying this is not an approval, it's a framework, is that we do time those things with grant availability, right? So, since I've been in parks over roughly 20 years, we've had Prop 12, Prop 40, Prop 50, Prop 68. So roughly every 5 years, you get a pretty good park bond that comes along that funds a lot of parks. Don't know what's on the horizon now, but just on average, it seems like about every 5 years you get a park bond that supports these things. Also, I think for some of the projects in Tahoe, we're really looking at for the cost of those projects, and the resort triangle, the paved trails are very expensive, millions and millions of dollars. So I think we're looking at some of the federal alternative transportation related money. Things like that, I think we're going to have to be able to tap into those. But it is a question of if. I mean, we don't go forward until we tap those sources, until we get that funding in place, and until we identify how it's going to be maintained. They don't go forward. So the pace of this plan is completely flexible based on funding availability and environmental review, permitting, and approval by the board.
Thank you.
Andy, I have a couple of questions. A few years ago, and I think it probably had to do with the North Fork Trail and the designs that were put in place to lower the speed and the downhills, uphills for the bikes. And I think I asked about, is there a county-wide speed limit on any of our trails? And I think you mentioned something about we were waiting to find out how they're doing it in Tahoe. When we were up at Tahoe in September, we were walking down, from the parking lot and then out to the viewpoint over Martis, that kind of S-curve, and you said that you were going to put in a line there, which you don't usually do.
Yeah.
I can just see people hauling ass down that incline.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if any thought has been given to what can be done. I mean, signs don't really help because there's a lot of people who just ignore them. And I think, most people in the biking community are very conscientious. But I'm just wondering if there was any movement on that, and if any of that's been discussed, or are we going to discuss that when we discuss e-bikes in our next phase of work?
I think so. I think the short answer is yes, that's a discussion left to be had. It's not a discussion that this plan, in terms of use policy, attempted to make. So we will be engaging the commission on the use of e-bikes, one. I could see there being different contexts in different areas of the county. So in Tahoe, you've got state parks, you've got federal government, you've got local agencies, all together with a connected trail system, and we're gonna have to work with those folks, because it has to make sense. I mean, you can't, cross over an imaginary line and change all the rules and all the signs, right? So we need to work together in the Tahoe context. I think the comment you heard earlier tonight about how things are done in Roseville and Rockland is another context. How do we work with those two communities to make a cohesive, understandable, clear system of regulation for trails there? And then in a place like Hidden Falls, that an open space, large open space park of our own, how does a place like that get regulated? I think we're in for some detailed discussions.
Good.
I don't have all the answers to
I
that.
look forward to it.
But yeah, I think that is an area that we're going to need to engage to update our policies on both speed regulation and e-bikes.
Okay, thank you. I have one other point, and I think the Green Valley Trailhead, the property of the Dick and Sally Toll easement, it has not been mentioned at all in here, and it is an existing park. While there's not a lot of stuff that needs to be done with the parking, I'll tell you right now, the culvert for the access to the parking lot, both ends have been crushed, and I'm not sure who's responsible for that. The parking lot looks pretty good. Only one tree fell down, which is amazing what we had. I walked down the trail about a mile, and there's some trees. I can take my chainsaw down there, but I'm wondering because the North Fork American River Alliance, group I'm a part with, did volunteer or, become the volunteer group for, help maintaining that trail. What involvement does the county have? Any involvement? And I know that there's a few things that we've talked about up there about, because it's not strictly a county, because it's access, parking for access to lands that are, people are allowed to camp for 14 days.
Right.
And I've heard issues with somebody had a hassle with the sheriff because somebody was trying to say, you can't be in here at night. Well, no, because we're parking, we're going down and gonna go some fishing and whatever. Is that something that you and I and Jerry Rio should be, just kind of work on the side here, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that any of those things are master plan level. I know Dan Fonner, our superintendent, is here taking notes about the culvert and things like that. I do
Okay.
know that we have a carve out in our code specifically for Green Valley Trailhead that gives it that exception to the normal hours that does allow people to be there for 14
I'm just thinking that
days.
signage
If
there-
signage needs to be more
And-
clear, yes, let's work on
And
that.
maybe a sign-in log, because, it's nice to know when we're having these fires,
Yeah.
who might be down there. And then
great idea.
one other point was, what was it? Darn. Oh, the guy who bought Dick and Sally Toll's property, Charles, has anybody talked with him? Because that, and I guess it goes to, who is responsible for monitoring that easement? I recall reading the deed or the agreement, and that the property owner is responsible for doing, thinning and all that stuff.
Yeah. I should probably refresh myself on the easement as well, but I know it is county, the county owns the property that the parking lot is on, and then the first part of that trail, and then it goes on to the easement area the easement is ours, and then it goes into BLM property.
Right,
So there's
right,
kind of
right.
multiple folks
Right.
responsible.
I just
there.
don't know if the new owner has any idea what he's supposed to be doing, and if he's willing to do it. He just wants to have a helicopter and fly around.
Does sound like a very worthy side project. We'll be happy to get with you and work on
Okay,
all of
then
those
let's
things.
work on that later. Thanks.
Yep.
Hey, Andy, I had a quick question.
Yes.
Are these figures pre-pandemic or have they been updated?
Oh, you mean inflationary costs?
Well, just the shift from the Bay Area, lots of new people coming up.
We did take a refresher look at, the best numbers we had available this year, so we've tried to keep up with the numbers. It does seem like inflation right now is pretty shocking, so I'm not sure that we've captured all of that. Not sure where it's going from here. But we are trying to keep a handle on these numbers and keep them freshened up every year. Shall I, and I promise this will be shorter, really, a little bit. Thank you. But I do want to, but it does have to be a little bit detailed because I want to walk you through the comments, and I think the changes are important, and some of the comments and questions we've gotten are important as well. So these are changes these are comments and changes that are already in the plan that's posted. So since 2021, since the last time you saw this plan and it got freshened up and reposted, this is what's incorporated into the 2022 plan that's on the website right now. So most of the comments, very pleasing to us, were in support of the plan. So we were really pleased to see the enthusiasm for the plan, and just want to note that. Got a lot of positive feedback for the plan, but some of the technical revisions that we made, folks that live along, we had shown an alignment along the Truckee River that's part of the resort triangle that goes from Olympic Valley to Truckee. And folks looked at the plan and they said, that looks really detailed. And so we tried to back away from that and say, we didn't mean to imply that because it is its own project. It's going through its own environmental review right now. It is looking at alternates. And so we wanted to be very clear. We are not, our master plan is not picking the final alignment. We're just showing that there is a trail between Olympic Valley and Truckee along somewhere along the Truckee River corridor there. But we wanted to make sure that people knew that was corridor level. We are not stamping our plan on any particular alignment through there. Folks from Alpine Meadows were also interested in seeing a spur trail go from that resort triangle along the Truckee River up into Alpine Meadows to give them a path from their neighborhood down, and we said we'd be happy to put that on there. Again, corridor level, but happy to show that as diagrammatic. Dirt trails in northwest Placer County, so there were some folks that made comments that the alignment that we showed along Raccoon Creek was awfully close to a shooting range, and we have to admit we don't really want to trail too close to a shooting range. So we kind of backed away from the showing of that alignment right along Raccoon Creek and showed it as very diagrammatic. We will be careful that we don't go through a shooting range with our trail. We looked at some of the plans that have been adopted since our last rendition. So the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency and Auburn State Rec Area have both updated their plans, and we looked at ours for consistency. We've been talking quite a bit about the updated capital improvement list. I don't think I need to go into any more detail about that. And then originally, we had integrated our partner agency projects with Auburn Rec District, Tahoe City, North Tahoe PUD into our Tier 1 and Tier 2 projects. And we realized that just was not, there wasn't a way to show those apples and apples comparison. They have different ways of evaluating theirs than we do, so we pulled all of their projects out and just showed them as partner agency projects. They're important. The intent of those is that there is an expectation that the county will come along in some form of support. It could be with park dedication fees, it can be partnering on grant applications, it could be any number of ways, but those are projects that we do want to support. And then that final bullet there were just a number of technical edits. We went through, we looked at the math, we looked at the consistency of nomenclature between references and all those kind of things, recognized some of the new things we're getting into, like shaded fuel breaks and things like that, but we did just do a general clerical cleanup of the entire plan. So that's already in the plan that's posted. Now I want to transition from comments that have come in since we posted the plan in December. We did tell people, we called it a final draft, because we didn't want to give the impression that, we're starting from scratch. We've been working on it for 5 years. I think we're getting it pretty close to being dialed. But we also want to be accurate if possible. If people have good comments and good changes to propose, we want to make them. We want to make them as concisely as we can. It is expensive to produce a whole new plan. So what I'd like to do is go through these comments and talk about where we will be recommending changes for kind of a one final plan. And then at the very end, there'll be a slide for your recommendation that lists those proposed changes of ours. So you're trying to make it easy for you to make a motion if you concur with us. But I want to go through some of these comments. One generous person offered to help us with Cisco Grove Gould Park and was excited about that project, so we'd be excited about some help on that project as well. Acknowledging, what do we have up there in the support for improvements to Cisco Grove Gould Park. Trail connections, we'll be talking about that in more detail, some of the other comments. Growth of lacrosse, that would drive some of the use of fields, also some of the size of fields. So we acknowledge that. I think it is inherent in our plans already. We got a lot of comments about e-bikes, especially in this round of comments. So we got a lot of comments in favor of broadening e-bike use, and we got comments about restricting e-bike use. So as we were just talking about, I think that's a policy discussion that's going to take place following this plan. This plan did not attempt to have that policy discussion about the use of e-bikes, but we do recognize all those comments. We will still compile those comments and bring them forward to when we have that discussion on e-bikes. There was a comment about, particular improvements at North Tahoe Regional Park, so we would direct them up to North Tahoe Regional Park. The individual agencies that own those facilities that are our partners, they are responsible for their own planning, and we come alongside them as a supporter and a funder for some of those things. Got a couple of blanket comments about opposition to mountain bikes and open spaces. That was just a kind of a blanket comment. And then we come to more emphasis and prioritization of bike paths and trails in Granite Bay. So I want to talk about this one because this is one comment, but it's also reflective of the two that you have in your hands that just came in. The comments have noted, and we're hearing broadly, increased interest in planning for trails and open space in Granite Bay. And we concur with that. We've also heard and continue to hear a continued demand for field space in Granite Bay. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, and I'd like to talk about both for a minute. We do have a demand for high field space, but there's a couple of ways I think that's going to be addressed. One, you heard at your last meeting, Bayside Church is coming forward with some fields that will help augment what's already there in Granite Bay for the benefit of the Granite Bay public. Two, one of the other initiatives that we want to take forward this year is to look at our rental fees for our fields. We have fees dramatically lower than market rate. I think we introduced this topic to you last year, and then we got busy with Hidden Falls, and we got busy with this plan, and so we haven't come forward any further, but that's going to be something coming out of this plan that I think is a high priority for 2022, is to look at those rental fees. We're charging about $2 an hour for fields, and I think as we look around at the market, they're in the $25 to $35 an hour range. And so we need to know if we're to adjust those fees closer to market rate, what impact would that have on folks that are putting pressure on our fields just because they're cheap? And one of the things that we want to explore with your commission and the communities of Granite Bay and Loomis is the idea of prorating rental rates, taking into consideration the roster on the different youth leagues, the number of kids that live within the assessment district. So if you're already paying at the office, so to speak, if you're already paying on your property tax, that proportion of your roster, we'd like to look at giving those folks a break, a proportional break on the fees that they're paying for rentals. So encouraging the local teams that have a preponderance of kids that are already in the districts paying assessments, give them a break, encourage them, kind of help prioritize those, and let the folks from outside kind of pay their fair share by paying a higher rental rate. So with all that, and I think before we make too much motion further in any given project for more field, before we invest a lot of money, I think we should look at what happens when we make those changes. What's the remaining demand in Granite Bay? Again, I think the Granite Bay fields at Eureka School, if there's ever a great place to develop fields for as low a cost as you're ever going to get and a partnership to keep maintaining them thereafter, that would be probably the best deal that we've run into, would be helping come alongside them and just rejuvenate the fields with natural turf and make them more playable. I think we could do that at a fraction of the cost of that grander plan they had for artificial turf field. I want to keep both of those things on the radar, but I think they're all going to have a time. So that being said, without investing in a $4 million project, that does leave money in the park fee account in Granite Bay. It does leave resources. And we agree with the folks who are coming forward and saying, let's do some more detailed planning. How do you make trail connections? You're looking at a big regional, metropolitan regional trail, the very south end of Granite Bay. How does Granite Bay connect? What opportunities are there in Granite Bay for more open space? Good questions, I think. The open space question would not necessarily be all about parks, because I think there's other partners that focus in open space, the Legacy Program, the PCCP, so it may not all be us. But we're right now we're starting to work with Supervisor Jones, starting to work with the MAC in Granite Bay. We'll be bringing forward, working with planning and GIS to start putting together a map of all of Granite Bay and what are those opportunities and constraints? Where are the trails that exist? Where are the nodes that should connect? Where are the logical trail corridors? Where are the opportunities for large-scale open space? So we're happy to have that discussion in the community of Granite Bay. What are the opportunities? Where should we focus? And we're happy to support that. I don't think there's anything about this plan that precludes us from having more detailed discussion about trail connectivity and open space in Granite Bay. This plan can live, it can be updated. So we're fully happy to have that discussion with Granite Bay about their more detailed planning desires for trails and open space. And I don't think it's mutually exclusive to the fields. The other comment another one I want to spend a little time on is a clarification of a trail alignment referred to as trail number 23. So we've gotten a couple of comments that have come in, and this is what trail number 23 is referring to. I'm going to show you a picture. This is out of volume 2 of the plan, where we number different trail segments. And you can see Trail 23 is shown as coming from, that's the Hidden Falls expansion property that you saw on slides earlier, goes along the Bear River and over to Highway 49. I think the confusion came with how that's described on the next page. Under the bullet there for number 23 says it is an unpaved multi-use trail, connects Kramer Road and Bell Road trails to proposed open space trail network along Highway 49. Good catch, I think. That statement has been there since the first draft of this plan. That alignment's been there since the first draft of the plan, but for whatever reason, nobody really caught it. I think it is confusing. It does kind of miss the point. So the point of that trail alignment 23 shown there is not to connect Bell and Kramer. It's to connect the major recreational trail nodes to one another. So it's to get the complex of trails from the Hidden Falls properties over to the Highway 49 corridor, where you will, you might note, or I'll point out, there's a purple dot along Highway 49 now. That is the result of the newest bicycle plan by the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency that now proposes a buffered lane alongside Highway 49, so a protected pedestrian lane along Highway 49 all the way to the Nevada County line. So the idea is to connect to that, and then ultimately be able to go to points west. So if you can get down Highway 49, you can cross into El Dorado County. We have portions of trail easement along that Route 22 that connects to the polygon there is the Sugar Pine Mountain Trail, which is the trail around the Winchester subdivision. So that's the point. So we will propose a change. We're not trying to connect Bell Road and Kramer. We're trying to connect the Hidden Falls complex. That's consistent, I think, with the entire vision of this plan of connecting major recreational nodes to one another and to populations, to housing, to other transportation corridors. But that is completely a corridor level. It doesn't show up on either our Tier 1, our Tier 2, or even our aspirational project list. It really is just a corridor mark of a future desire to connect each of those regional recreation nodes to one another. Now, as we were looking at the comment on Trail 23, we did notice, if you'll note, on the bubble for Trail number 21, as you go from bubble 21 up to the trail complex along the Bear River, you'll see a little trail stub that comes off of that trail and heads back to the east toward the Auburn Valley neighborhood. That is not a trail. It's not intended to be a trail. It is a maintenance access easement that we have to get to some of those trails, but not intended for public use. So while we were looking at the comments on Trail 23, we noticed that that should be edited out as well. So we proposed to take that stub out. That's not intended to be a trail. So there was a broad question that came in, you know, how's the county going to regulate trails? You know, you get a big trail plan throughout all the county. How are you going to look at illegal parking, trespassing, trails in the wildland-urban interface, those kind of things? And I want to answer that. I think it's kind of some other comments similar. And the basic answer is each of these projects comes forward with its own environmental review and in its own context. And the folks, I think, that have been asking these comments and questions have their, you know, their mind has been, they've been talking with us about Hidden Falls for a long time. So the context of Hidden Falls is a piece of property or multiple properties with controlled entrance, properties controlled by the county. And so that's how we looked at the context of those. It is properties that we have responsibility over, large properties, over large acreage. We're looking at fire risk reduction within those controlled acres that we have responsibility for. Before we open Hidden Falls, we are updating our fuels management plan, working with a registered forester, working with CAL FIRE on evacuation. That's the context of Hidden Falls. That's the level of detail we needed to go into with Hidden Falls, and that's what we've done. As we were planning for Hidden Falls, there were elements of that plan that fell out of the plan, and that may very well be the case with some of the other plans as well. There's no longer any parking in the very north of that plan. So some things come, some things go. That's why each project in this list will be looked at in its own context, in its own environmental review. And for example, a very different context in Tahoe, where the vision of trails there is not to be within a government-owned piece of land. It is to connect into and through multiple communities. People come off their back porch, they go get onto the trail. People can park at any given supermarket and access the trail. There's trail heads all over the place. Each project is a very different context, and it has to be looked at with its own individual project level environmental review. And so that's my basic answer to the questions about what are you going to do about all this. They each get evaluated as they come forward. Did get one comment about a trail I think that could have some good possibilities, PG&E easement in Meadow Vista, but we did talk about it with the folks who brought it to our attention and said I think it just needs a little bit more thought and maturity before we're ready to put it on the plan. So we're not advocating a plan there. You heard tonight already about the trail signage in Roseville, and I think we've talked about that. I think there's big areas of the county that are going to have to look at trail policy within the context of their surrounding jurisdictions as well. And then I think I already talked about how our new facilities and improvements going to be funded prior to this, anticipating this question coming up. We did get comments from the Forest Service. In particular, they did talk about snow trails. One thing that we have not attempted to do in this plan is talk about snow trails. I think it's a worthy thing to talk about. We're going to have to talk about it. There's a higher demand yearly for what trails should be groomed, what trails should be plowed, and that's exceedingly expensive, but it's also popular. But this plan just did not cover snow trails, so I think that's a work yet to come forward. Tahoe National Forest noted that they wanted us to be consistent in our trails, especially where they coincide with Tahoe National Forest trails, with their standards, which we agree with. We showed two cross Placer County trails, one along the I-80 corridor, one along the Bear River corridor. The Forest Service expressed to us that their priority would be the one along the I-80 corridor. And I think that's true in our capital improvement plan. We show sections of that trail, the Emigrant Trail, are parts of our Tier 1, Tier 2 projects. Trails along the Bear River are not yet part of our project plan. But we do want to acknowledge, you know, the desire to have that trail so that we could be in a position to capitalize on opportunities for easements and things like that as they come along. But we would agree with the Forest Service that our momentum, our priorities, our project resources would be mostly directed toward the trail along the I-80 corridor and not the one along the Bear River, at least to begin with. And then these final two were just, the Forest Service had asked us to update our maps to be consistent with the nomenclature, the trail naming, and the alignments that they have made since the last renditions of our plan. And this is the Sawtooth Ridge area between Highway 89 on the left and the Martis Valley on the right. Most of the changes, or a lot of the changes they advocated, are on this map. We will be updating to show their alignment. In general, our philosophy, the entire plan, we want to catalog what other agencies are doing. We don't want to drive what they're doing, but we want to be as accurate as we can. So we'll be making those changes. These comments are all encapsulated in that idea of updating our plan to be consistent with the latest alignments of the Forest Service. So that brings us to a recommendation, and I'll just kind of walk you through the intent here, and then really, I promise, I'm finished for a while. So we are recommending that you recommend support of the plan to the Board of Supervisors, but before that plan gets there, we propose a final draft with those changes that we've brought forward to you tonight. If you agree with those changes, I think you could make that motion of support with the inclusion of changes proposed on slides 36, 37, and 38, which we have already talked about as you get closer. Those are the changes that we have proposed to make. With that, I'll stop, can get in more detail about any of these. A mouthful, I think a necessary mouthful, but a mouthful nonetheless.
Have any final? Or any staff? No? Okay, well, it's a pretty robust presentation. Kind of a lot to grasp. However, we are looking for a motion to make this recommendation. Recommendation.
Yeah, public
Oh, yeah,
comment.
I do have to, I'm sorry. Do we have any public comment relative to the master? I think we have gentlemen in the audience.
Just you, Jim.
I'd just like to, Jim Hoggensmith, Newcastle, I'd like to quickly say the plan looks really good. It's visionary. It does exactly what it's supposed to do, which is really describe where we're going for the next 20 or so years. There's been a lot of effort put into it, and I encourage you to support it and move the plan forward. I'd like to also add that there's a lot of opportunity to bring in volunteers to help out with some of the maintenance stuff. County's done a pretty good job with that in the past. I know I put in a number of hours of volunteer work at Hidden Falls last year, and it was greatly appreciated and definitely reduced the cost to the county, and plan to continue doing that forward with a group of dedicated volunteers. Yeah, there's definitely people out there that want to help and can reduce the county's costs on some of that work. So, again, just thanks for all the great work, guys, and move forward.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Rideout. I retired Deputy Director of Public Works in October of 2020, and so I was involved in this project since its inception. Just briefly want to express my support today for this thoughtful and thorough process. The sound fiscal analysis and the comprehensive public outreach have really made this a great plan. My comments today are despite my prior involvement, because honestly, staff and the consultant did a fantastic job pulling together all of this information, evaluating the plan, and I urge you to recommend the support of the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional public comment in the audience? And we have some online, I think.
Judy, please unmute your mic and go ahead and talk. Maureen?
Yes, this is, my name is Maureen Henderson, and I live in Newcastle. I'm also the Trails Liaison for Loomis Basin Horsemen's Association, so I'm speaking here today on behalf of myself and the association. And about 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to work with the design firm and had some provide input for this the initial plan draft. So I just wanted to say that Placer County Parks has put together a wonderful plan. They took this, the final draft, over on a tour and held many hearings throughout the county, mostly MAC hearings, to obtain input from the public regarding their wishes and priorities with respect to developing the current master plan. So in today's world, we're spending a lot more time recreating outside. Trails are an important part of our physical and mental health. Many of us would have gone over the edge had it not been for outdoor recreational opportunities made available to us throughout the pandemic. These recreational opportunities were provided to us in large part by Placer County Parks. A lot more people are moving to Placer County, and they're moving here to enjoy the beauty and high quality of life and outdoor recreation. And I believe it's imperative that there be a master plan for our parks and trails. I think the plan that's been presented to you has been tailored to meet the needs and the requests of the citizens of our communities. And it only makes sense that we have a master plan to be in place to guide us through future development as our communities continue to expand. We support and hope that the Parks Commission will recommend support of the master plan to the Board of Supervisors. Thank you. Thank you to Parks staff for putting together such a wonderful presentation and plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, please unmute your mic and go ahead and speak.
Commissioners, my name's Jeff Foltz. I'm a resident of Rockland for the last 16 years. I've followed the Parks and Trails master plan with great interest the last 4 years. Also supported the Hidden Falls Trail Expansion Program. I'm in full support of the master plan expansion plan, having trails from Tahoe to Roseville and everywhere in between, providing usable open space for current and future residents is a great plan. Providing trails that residents can recreate on helps with the health of our residents and provides space where the county residents can interact with nature. I also support the new proposed mission statement, enriching lives. What a better way than having an extensive trail system to enrich our lives. Big thank you to the Parks staff and the Parks Commission for shepherding this project through the process. I encourage your yes vote to approve the master plan and forward it to the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl,
Hi,
please.
Cheryl Berkema. Thank you for hearing my comments. I do want to say that I absolutely support the plan with the exception of the Granite Bay segment. And I'd like to elaborate on that. I'm very excited to see the regional trails connecting, and especially the American River Parkway. Having said that, though, in Granite Bay, I believe, so Andy Fisher gave me a bunch of files that I requested. I requested all of the engineering reports and asked us what I thought was a simple question. Granite Bay residents have assessed themselves for the past, I don't know, you'll have to ask them, 2 decades for parks and trails. In that time, I asked him how much money has been spent on parks, how much money has been spent on trails, and how much has been spent on sports fields. He could not give me an answer. I intend to give this information, go through every single engineering report for the past couple decades, and look at how much money has been spent, because it has been mostly spent on sports fields and maintenance of sports fields, because we don't have trails. So we appreciate the Barton Trail connector that's being proposed, but in addition to that, Andy Fisher did make an announcement at the presentation that Granite Bay has an aging population. Granite Bay residents have been promised trails for decades and have not have received them. Granite Bay residents voted to assess themselves for parks and trails, yet trails have not been provided. Measure A, which was a school measure, which would have provided playing field upgrades on the Eureka site, was defeated. I think that rather than listening to the loudest voice in the room, it's always easy to take a special interest group such as every parent and student at Eureka School District and make a lot of noise, but that is a special interest. There are a lot of seniors that deserve walking trails. Because it was defeated, I would think that the Eureka School District should update their facilities plan based on input from the public and not just from the Eureka School District sports fans. I think that the voters have spoken. They decided not to even support the schools, never mind the sports fields. They don't want to put money into schools. The population is aging. The people there deserve to have fields, deserve to have trails to be able to walk their community. My daughter went to school at Eureka and could not even walk 1 mile to Eureka's high school because it's not safe to walk. So there's a health issue and a mental health issue with the people that are in the community that have been paying for decades. And I intend to take all those reports and figure out how much has been spent on these fields and provide that. We have a new supervisor, and I think it would behoove the commission to please consider working with Supervisor Jones to see what does the community really want. Your consultant said that trails are the most important and rose to the
Cheryl,
highest.
thank you for your comment. Your time is up.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and effort.
Brian, please unmute your mic and comment.
Oh, thank you. My name is Brian Wright. I've lived in Placer County for about 35 years, and I currently live in Roseville. I recently retired and spend most of my time now as, for lack of a better term, a professional volunteer. I work a lot in Western Placer, El Dorado County, and a lot in the Tahoe Basin. I've seen a lot of different trail and parks plans. I think this one is outstanding, and I'm really happy to see the amount of effort that was put in recognizing things like connectivity between communities, different trail systems, supporting different types of usage patterns. But I think one of the most important parts is how it is also forward-looking. One thing the pandemic has shown us is the unprecedented growth in usage in trail systems all over presumably the country, but definitely in this area. So I think the plan recognizes that well. I will also echo what one of the earlier commenters said about not hesitating to engage volunteers. I know there's a lot of passionate volunteers who'd be more than happy to invest effort to help support this. So please vote yes and move it forward to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob, please unmute your mic and make your comment.
Hi, my name's Bob Gilliam. I'm a Placer County resident for almost 40 years. I'm speaking on behalf of Placer Trails, which is a coalition of 7 trail groups active in Placer County. We have a combined membership of over 4,000. Our groups span the full spectrum of trail users, mountain bikers, hikers, runners, and equestrians, and the full diversity of Placer County, from the Valley to the High Sierra. Placer Trails is united in supporting the development of new multi-use trail networks and the other facilities included in the Park and Trail Master Plan. As frequent users of our region's parks and trails, we see firsthand the increased overcrowding And seldom has it been so clear as in this time of the global pandemic that people need access to parks and trails without the hazards of congestion and overcrowding. Parks and trails are good for public health and they're good for the economy. So Placer Trails enthusiastically supports Placer County's Park and Trail Master Plan, and we urge the Parks Commission to recommend approval by the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, please unmute your mic and make your comment.
Hi there, this is Chris Johnson from the Granite Bay MAC. And first of all, I do want to thank Andy and his team for hearing what we've been talking about in Granite Bay on our need for trails. You know, one of the key things that I look at in this whole thing is it's integral to our entire community in terms of our trails need to be connecting us to our schools, to our neighborhoods, and to our commercial districts. So I do look forward to working with Andy and his team. We've recently formed some subcommittees through the MAC that citizens will be involved in, and let's get further definition, and we really need to move this forward. Regarding funding, I think there's lots of opportunities out there. You know, there's the National Trail Link group, Rails to Trails. I think that we'll be able to find some funding for this, but we really do need to prioritize it. We shouldn't have to wait another 20, 30 years. I've been here for 34 years and we've been talking about trails that whole time. One other comment has mentioned on the financing of the soccer fields and the big demand for our soccer fields. Well, yeah, there's a big demand. It sounds like because they're cheap and it's a lot of people from around the community. So as we move forward with making decisions on where to invest in soccer fields and this type of thing, we do really need to test the market and make sure that we're not just building our soccer fields for other communities when our own community is starved for trails. Again, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you at the MAC.
Thank you. Sandra, please unmute your mic and go ahead and make your comment.
Okay, this is Sandy Harris, and I've lived in Granite Bay for 44 years. I wish I were 40 years younger so I could enjoy all these trails that are envisioned. It looks like a great plan. I do have my own trail that I've made for my neighborhood to walk every morning for 2 or 3 miles. And we could use some better trails, but this vision for the whole county is really good. So pass it on, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, does that wrap up our online comments, looks like? Okay, well, thank you all for those comments. We will close public session, but let's go for any commissioner comments. Do we have any comments from commissioners? Yeah.
On the plan, or are we gonna,
Anything you
are
want
you
to say?
ready for a motion?
Well, we can entertain a motion.
I
Do we
would,
have any
I'd like
comments
to
on
just
any
make a
of the-
comment that I really appreciate the, you know, the focus that this was done, as many of them said, you know, like making sure that the trails are connected, making sure that, you know, we have the funding and so on and so forth. I think the main thing that I came away with when we approved it a few years ago was that if we have any problems with any of the specifics, they're all going to be taken up on a project level basis with hearings and going to come here and all of that. And that just, to me, relieves a lot of any kind of misgivings I might have, because we take, you know, we handle it at that level and make the changes and you know, the finesse and the fine tuning on that. So.
Okay. Anything, comment? No? Verge?
Andy, I'd like to thank you and your staff for putting this thing together, consultant too, and listening to people and taking their comments into consideration and their wants and their needs and their desires. I appreciate that from a community aspect. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one thing, that after listening to public comments at the beginning of the meeting and during the course of the post-meeting comments, design workshop, you mentioned not only the nuts and bolts of building and maintaining, but that part of the master plan was to engage the public in this, in the process, and I was a little vague on that. But I think after hearing some of these comments, that engagement not only has to do with use, but also the willingness of the population to, of our populace to engage in the actual definition and fruition of these projects during the course of exercising the goals of the master plan. And tell me if that's kind of what you meant when you talked about that public side of life, with the community relative to the county, and then the folks who were talking about the level of volunteerism, which I really admired in these comments, as potentially salvation for both enforcement and maintenance of some of these projects, is engaging the public in that fashion.
Yeah, I guess there was a piece of engaging the public in the conversation about what you want to see as part of the plan, and then I think engagement to continue to activate parks. Is that in terms of connecting people to the parks through either volunteer programs or other ways to engage them and help them connect and appreciate the outdoors? Is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, kind of where I'm going is like, I don't like relying on government to tell me what to do every step of the way. Yes, I know I got to drive 35 miles an hour, I get that. But some of the enforcement problems with e-bikes and which way do we walk on the down the trails and everything else, government can't just monitor that. It has to be a community will and just a general feeling of this is how you do it. And I'm not saying vigilantism is the way to do it either, but that an outreach program by the county and continuing to entertain people's, like something gets done, the trail, the way the signage is working in Roseville is not working, that the county feels welcome to come and talk to this commission or talk to staff and say, this ain't going down the right way. We need to fix this. Tell me how I can help you do it. And getting that amount of enthusiasm from the public, I think, will truly be the way that we're going to go forward.
Yeah, and this plan starts it and it continues on through each project.
You know, the core value seems strong, so I appreciate that. Okay, are we all done with that? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion to support for the final draft Placer County Park and Trail Master Plan to the Board of Supervisors with the changes Andy noted on pages 63, I think, Andy, right?
36 of the presentation, 37, and 38.
And 38. Okay, so would anyone like to make that motion?
I move that we recommended the Board of Supervisors to approve the Parks and Trails Master Plan and approve of the changes that were noted on page 33?
36, 37.
36, 37, and 38, as Andy pointed out.
Great. Okay, can we get?
I'll second.
We have a second, David? Okay. No additional comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Okay. Passes. So, next park meeting, Commissioners meeting is March 17th, Thursday, 5:30. See you all then. Okay.
Thank you.
Motion, meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Good job, Andy.
Thank you.